Hello and bonjour. You're watching Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bokhari at TAG TV. So election day is tomorrow, June the 7th. New Democrats are poised to do well, but the PCs are in a position to do better, writes CBC News. Doug Ford's PCs have inched ahead of Andrea Horwath's New Democrats in the polls. But despite the close race in the popular vote, the PCs have a better regional distribution of that vote and so are heavily favored to win more seats. The NDP's forward momentum appears to have stalled. It is no coincidence that the Liberal slide has also slowed, leaving the party with just enough support to be competitive in a handful of ridings. Probability of winning, 87.4% probability of the Progressive Conservatives winning a majority, 3.4% probability of the Progressive Conservatives winning the most seats but not a majority, 2.8% probability of the NDP winning the most seats but not a majority, 5.8% probability of the NDP winning a majority. So today in our studio we have online two very worthy guests. Professor Nelson Weisman of University of Toronto. He's joining us on the phone, as well as our regular speaker, Mr. Ari Laskin of Capitol Hill Group. So my first question is to you, Professor Weisman. If Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives win a majority government on Thursday, that is tomorrow, about half of the seats could come from the Greater Toronto Area. If Andrea Horwath's New Democrats win instead, it will be due to the party scoring a deeper breakthrough in the region than expected. As it has in the past, the GTA could be the vote region that could cast the decisive vote in this provincial election. So, Professor, is GTA poised to play kingmaker in the elections?
Yes, it has, and I think the comments you made are spot on. It's just got so many seats, and the party that has won the 905, I think in the last 6 elections, has become the governing party. And that's an area in which the NDP has not been very strong. This time, they might outdistance the Liberals in the 905, and they might win a few seats, but you can expect that the Conservatives will take the majority of the seats, and probably a significant majority of the seats. And that should put them over the top. And I also expect they're going to win some seats in the 416, where they haven't had any seats in at least 2 elections before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we also have Ari Laskin of Capitol Hill Group. Ari, what do you think? Is GTA the kingmaker in election results?
Well, I hate to sound like a boring person, but I 100% agree with the professor on this. The GTA, if you just look at the seat breakdown on the number of seats that you have in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area compared to the rest of the province, the density is just there. When looking on a map of Ontario, a poll breakdown map, the southern and southwestern Ontario, especially from the GTA, is littered with a ton of ridings that are all very much in play. To what the professor said with regards to the NDP and the 905, this is a big move for them. This is one of the first times that they've actually shown that they're a real player and they can be a real challenger in the 905. And in the 416, conversely, the Tories, this is really the first time, at least in my memory, you see a conservative, progressive conservative provincial government, or provincial party rather, making some real headway in the Greater Toronto area and the 416 proper. So I do believe that the GTA and the GTHA, more broadly, will be the determining factor.
Okay, so in 2014, the GTA was largely responsible for giving Kathleen Wayne's Liberals a majority government. 4 years later, the party will be lucky to hang on to any ridings in the region. The Liberal vote has collapsed in the GTA Hamilton-Niagara region, and it's down by 21 points from the 39% the Liberals captured in 2014. So my question to, I will ask the professor first maybe, would Liberal Party keep its status now even, Professor Weisman?
Well, that's an open question. I mean, the NDP, I think it got 23% in the last election. It still held a number of seats, many more than are required for official party status, which is 8 seats. But the NDP's vote has always been more concentrated. The Liberal vote is spread around more. It is much more urban and suburban, because if you look at the electoral map, Liberals have been very weak in the rural areas. So it depends. I mean, the polls have them at 17 to 20%, the most recent numbers I've seen. Yes, with 17 to 20%, in a House of 124, you can win 8 seats, but not necessarily. It's possible to just win 1 or 2 or even none. A similar thing happened to the federal Progressive Conservative Party in 1993. They got 16% of the vote, which is close to where the provincial Liberals are now, and they only won 2 seats out of 308 at the time. So it depends on how the vote splits. I expect the Liberals will hold at least a couple of seats in Toronto proper, Kathleen Wynne's seat, and St. Paul's, which historically votes solidly Liberal. But, you know, I mean, there's also the University Rosedale seat where they've done well, but I think now they might lose that to the NDP.
Mm-hmm.
And they've also had a seat in Ottawa, Windsor. I think they have some representation in Hamilton. So they could squeeze out 8 seats, but it's an open question.
Okay, so Ari, what do you have to say? Is the Liberal Party going to keep its party status? Because the predictions are that they are looking very weak.
Yeah, I think that it's a fair statement to say that nobody has a crystal ball on this one. It's difficult to determine, and it wouldn't be fair to determine if they're going to keep a party status or not.
Mm-hmm.
If we're to look at the numbers and the distribution, as the professor said, Liberals are more widely distributed in terms of their support base than the New Democrats. That being said, in the areas where the Liberals have some sort of support and do have that distribution, their biggest challenger in that respect is going to be the Tories. And the Tories have historically done very well in rural areas. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to hold on to their party status. I know that Kathleen Wynne she said this morning in one of her press conferences, she hopes to hold on to her seat, but she honestly doesn't even know. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big indicator there. If the premier or the incumbent premier said she doesn't know if she's going to hold on to her seat, that's really putting a lot of doubts in my mind. I think that they'll probably hold on to 1 or 2 seats in Toronto proper. Mm-hmm. Toronto Centre, I think, is going to go their way. I also think Toronto St. Paul's could probably go their way. But in those 2 ridings, their big challengers are going to be the NDP. In Toronto St. Paul's, for example, the Liberals have a 35.7% support rate against the NDP, which is 26.4%. The Tories are sitting there at 32.2%, but that also means that you got to get people to show up. It's probably Liberals by, I would say, 60% of the vote is going to go to the Liberals. So, and the same thing with Toronto Centre. You're looking at very strong numbers for Liberal support and very good turnout numbers for Liberal supporters in historical elections. So it's going to be very interesting to see which Liberal candidates are going to become members of provincial parliament. And I think what's going to be even more interesting is we're going to see a new leader of the Liberal Party emerge out of this.
Okay, so it means that Kathleen Wynne might even lose her Don Valley West seat?
If she loses her seat, she's going to have to resign as the leader. But even if she wins her seat, my guess is she will step down as the leader.
Mm-hmm. And what were the reasons she conceded just I think, 1 week before the election? Why would she come out and just say, I'm accepting, I'm conceding?
Well, I don't know if I would go as far as saying it was a concession. I think that she said, and I don't want to quote her in this because I don't know exactly what the verbatim, but the impression that I got was she was saying she knows that her party won't be elected, and as such, she won't be the premier. say that I'm conceding this election and I'm going to not put in any effort. She had about 5 or 6 whistle stops this afternoon, and it's only 3:15. So she still has a number of more stops and event plans, or campaign events to attend. So I don't think that she's conceded the election. I do think that she's being very realistic and being very honest with Liberal supporters.
What do you think, Professor? Do you think Kathleen Wayne, stated that she's conceding?
Well, yeah, I mean, I see it as well, she said, look, I'm not going to be premier, so that means her party isn't going to win. But she did make a big pitch for people to still vote Liberal on the grounds that there was a good chance they could hold the balance of power and they would keep the feet of whichever party won the election, the NDP or the Conservatives. They'd keep their feet to the fire. I think Wynn's press conference didn't hurt her, although it doesn't seem to have helped her. People appreciate honesty. They appreciate authenticity. And they don't like being fed spin or lies by politicians or by anybody else. And so, and the Liberals recognized that they couldn't win. So for her to come out and say, oh yeah, we're fighting, we have a good ground game, we'll still pull out people, we'll see what happens, but we're still hoping. People know they're not going to win. Now, if I could just loop this back to the numbers you reported from the CBC Globe, CBC poll tracker, if you look at those numbers and the projections of seats, and that's all it is, and you're guessing there, it's anywhere from 1 to 11 seats. And I think it was just yesterday or the day before, the projection was 1 to 15 seats. According to poll tracker, the Liberal vote is held, but it's dropped 0.2% in the past day. And the NDP vote has gone up 0.3, and so is the Conservative vote, 0.2. Now, again, those are averages of polls we've had the past week or so. But when you look at them, the numbers are fairly steady, but the Liberals haven't made any gains. And, so we'll see. We'll see just how the vote breaks down in these constituencies. But I can't see them winning just one seat. I'd be surprised if they don't win 3 or 4.
Having Liberals out of the game, and I believe I'm very fair enough to say that Liberals are out of the game, like NDP and PCs are neck to neck now. What do you have to say on this, Professor?
Well, as we've talked about this, and as CBC's poll numbers indicate, the probability numbers, I don't think they're neck and neck. I think they're closer to each other in the popular vote, although I still think the Conservatives will win it. But the Conservative vote is just much more efficiently distributed. The NDP vote is clumped. Southwestern Ontario, 416, and even there in 416, it's not overwhelming, and they'll do very well in Hamilton, and of course they'll do well in Northern Ontario. So, and the Conservatives have more or less all the rural seats locked up. So, I just don't see it as close as the polls have been suggesting. But I'm wrong 70% of the time.
One last question to the professor, because Professor, I know you have to go. Professor, do you think that the various controversies connected to the NDP candidates is the reason NDP is a little behind now?
Yeah, no, I don't. No, the controversies respecting candidates that are hurting a party is the Conservative Party. Everything from all the shady nominations that have gone on, which members of their own party, denounced. We had executives resigning in a number, like whole constituency associations resigning. We also had a lot of seedy characters involved. People who have been have been charged with crimes and convicted, and now we have other people under investigation. We've got police investigations in Hamilton. We've got police investigations around the 407. We discovered a couple of days ago that another candidate in Brampton, a Conservative candidate, there are 4 lawsuits outstanding against him. So no, I think most of the only thing I saw an NDP candidate, although something else may have popped up, was the woman who had posted a photo of Hitler and a quote there, which and given her background, the last thing I concluded from any of that is that she was some sort of Nazi sympathizer. And I thought that was rather a joke, and the Conservatives trying to make something of that, while you look at their own experience with their candidates, it just wasn't credible. But I think most people have decided already. I think what can hurt the Conservatives maybe a little bit now is this news of this lawsuit brought by Doug Ford's sister-in-law, and the revelation that she and her children haven't really received a cent yet from the estate of her husband, Rob Ford.
So do you think, okay, one last question before you go. I still have to ask you another question, Professor. What are you going to think the result is going to be for tomorrow? PCs or NDPs?
Well, I think the Conservatives are going to win. But as I told you, you know what? You'll have to really ask an astrologer. They
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time. And we are going to continue our interview with Mr. Ari Laskin. Ari, at this time, I would like to ask you about the undecided voters. So what are the things they should look for as far as the undecided voters are concerned? Are they going to look at the minimum wage or the hallway health care or the hydro?
I think it's going to come down to all three of those issues, and it really depends on where that individual lives and what their current situation is. Let's take, for example, if you have somebody who is the primary caregiver for an aging parent or a senior, they may be more concerned about, well, what are the parties saying about hallway medicine? What are the parties saying about long-term care, beds and facilities? Who's going to be creating more that's going to help me? A lot of this comes down to what's going to impact me more so than what's going to be better for the province. And I think it's a fairly, I don't know if people are going to agree with me or jump down my throat on this, but I think to go and say, well, it's going to be better for the province, yeah, that's a nice line to say, but a lot of people are very benevolent in their respect, and they say, well, yeah, it'll be better for the province, but it's also going to be better for me. And that's sort of where you get the adage of what's going to help my bottom line? How am I going to improve my lot of life? So with regards to the undecided voters, and I don't know how many there are, to be honest. I think that you're looking at pretty much people have made their decision where they're going to be going. And I'm just trying to see if there's any real numbers for undecided. And if you're looking at pretty much that number is in the single digits in every poll that I've seen and every results that I've seen. You're looking at most people know where they're going, where they want to see this province going, and how that's going to benefit them. And I think for people that are in urban centers, long-term care and hallway medicine is going to be a big one. Minimum wage may come up as well, depending on the socioeconomic position. But the other one that's going to be a big one, and this is going to be more in rural Ontario and the suburban areas, is going to be hydro. People that I live in Toronto, so people that live in Toronto, we pay a lot in hydro. We know we pay a lot in hydro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming back to NDP, Ari, what do you think the controversies connected to their various candidates? It has to say something about the NDP status in the polls, that they are a little behind and they're not neck to neck.
Yeah, sort of. I'm sort of in the same light as the professor. I think that the Tories had an opportunity to make some real headway on that, and they did for about 2 weeks or so. That 2 weeks has since elapsed, and now the spotlight is on Doug Ford and Doug Ford's team. And unfortunately for the Tories, there are some issues with some of the candidates there. Now, Mr. Ford's been very forthright and been very open about it, that he is looking into these issues, he's looking into these allegations, and this is not something that he takes lightly. But I think for the other parties and the other candidates to go and say, well, look over there, look at what the Tories are doing, don't go throw stones in glass houses. You don't want to go and break your own house. And that's exactly what the NDP have done, and that's also what the Liberals have done for the most part. I think all of this mudslinging doesn't help any of the parties.
Mm-hmm.
The NDP are trying to lay it on thick right now with throwing as much mud as they can on Doug Ford and his team. To me, I've had people tell me, you know what, I'm sick and tired of hearing Andrea Horwath speak.
Mm-hmm. Like she's really,
That's a big problem.
Yes, she's siding with these questionable candidates, or their questionable statuses. Why is she siding with them? She's not calling a spade a spade.
This is a great question for her.
Yeah. Okay, so at this time, is the Renata's allegation on Doug Ford? Why is she alleging Doug Ford at this time? It's not coming at a very good time.
I think that lawsuit is something that is. I'd be wrong to say it's a vexatious lawsuit because I don't know the details of it. But I think to go and put forward something like this at this time, and say that if you don't pay us to Rob's widow, then we're going to go public with this. To me, it strikes me as being almost extortion or blackmail. I think that Doug has been, and if you listen to his response the other day, he was very shaken by it. And I think that came off very naturally and very sincerely. He cares deeply about the future of his family, and that future includes his brother's children and his brother's widow. So I don't think he's made any confusion about the fact that he will always be there for them, and he intends on always being there for them. And this lawsuit is a distraction, trying that who knows why they brought it forward at this particular time. But he said, I will continue on supporting that family because they're my family.
Okay. Viewers, things look very good for the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario for tomorrow's election, which is June the 7th. After the break, we're going to talk more with our panelists. Stay tuned.
Greenish Hair, Skin and Nails formula is packed with all the essential nutrients like biotin, omega-3, vitamins, and minerals to provide your hair, skin, and nails the nourishment that it needs. Like all other Greenish vitamins and supplements, the Hair, Skin, and Nails formula is gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, and non-GMO. It is also halal, kosher, and veggie certified. So make Greenish Hair, Skin, and Nails formula a part of your daily healthcare routine.
Welcome back to my show, Power Dilemma with Sarah Bokhari at TAG TV. Folks, we are talking about Ontario elections, which is tomorrow, June the 7th. It is the provincial election, which will be happening tomorrow. Before the break, we had a very interesting analysis on various parties, who is in and who is out, by two very worthy analysts, Professor Nelson Weisman of University of Toronto and Mr. Ari Laskin of Capitol Hill Group. We are also joined by Mr. Jamie Allerton of Conaptus. So we have these two analysts right now, Jamie Allerton and Ari Laskin. Welcome to my show, Jamie.
Thanks for having me back, Sarah.
Okay, so Jamie, my first question is to you. If Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives win a majority government on Thursday, about half of the seats could come from the Greater Toronto Area. If Andrea Horwath's New Democrats win instead, it will be due to the party scoring a deeper breakthrough in the region than expected. As it has in the past, the GTA could be the region that casts the decisive vote in this provincial election. So, Jamie, is GTA poised to play kingmaker in the elections?
Yeah, if you look at the over 40 seats that exist in the Greater Toronto Area, it is near impossible for any party to form government without a presence in the Greater Toronto Area, especially in this change election, with Kathleen Wynne having already waved the white flag and signaled the end of her government and end of 15 years of Liberal rule. That puts a lot more seats that normally wouldn't be in play into the equation. So no doubt in my mind, as we head towards voting day on Thursday, that the Greater Toronto Area, as goes the GTA, so will go the government.
Okay, Ari, what do you think? 905s and 416, are they the kingmakers in the result of the election?
Well, as I said before, I think that you're looking at the kingmakers being the GTHA. I know that it's a little bit of a nuance on that one, but I think that Hamilton and that area, the Golden Horseshoe area, is going to play a very significant role. If you look at just the number of seats that are available in that area, it's a significant number that almost outweighs the rest of the province. You have a ton of seats that are now up for grabs, and that's a debate, and it's a race between the Conservatives and the NDP in a lot of these. The Liberals aren't really there to show. There's maybe a couple of seats for them, but other than that, this is going to be a battle between the NDP and the Conservatives, and I think the GTHA is going to be where that battle is being held.
Okay, can you say that again? GTAH?
The GTHA, Greater Toronto and Hamilton area.
Okay, yeah, okay. Going forward, Jamie, my question is, do you see NDP and PCs neck to neck, or we are definitely going to have a PC majority tomorrow?
If you kind of take a look at all the polls that have been out there, it definitely favors a Conservative majority at this point. But there's also definitely still a pathway to victory for Andrew Horwath and the NDP. I think one of the things to watch out for is you kind of look at the headline numbers of the polls. Even though the NDP might win inner urban seats like in downtown Toronto, as they march 55-60%, which are pretty big numbers on a riding-by-riding basis, the Tories are more likely to squeeze out tighter races, but ultimately still a plurality in the outskirts of the GTA. With the complete collapse of the Liberal support, and if they indeed still show up at the polls, those numbers can kind of move towards the NDP in a stop Doug Ford movement. We haven't seen any kind of real groundswell for something like that, but the undecideds are still fairly high at this point in the game, and if they show up en masse and decide to vote against Doug, that's essentially the NDP's path to victory on Thursday.
Jamie, you're mentioning the undecided voters at this time. What are the things which the undecided voters are going to look at to determine who are they going to vote?
Well, I think this has kind of really been the aspiring emperors all have no close election. There's a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the electorate, even for longtime partisans, for how this campaign has been run, what has been on offer. And I think kind of voter cynicism and voter apathy is one of the things that are there. But if you're kind of looking at it as a ballot question and coming at this from a centrist or center-right perspective, you might not like everything you've seen, and perhaps some of the more recent controversy in the lawsuit with Doug Ford might kind of give you some doubts. But when you compare that to what the NDP is running for, which essentially is running the province down a continued path of fiscal restlessness and terrible management, and looking at how they're going to essentially hand the province over to the unions, while continuing to drive business sentiment and investment out of the province, leaving no one to pay for it, you're probably going to hold your breath and you're going to vote for PC. So I think those are one of the things that'll work out in the PC's favor. But the other, of course, is that voters just might stay home. 51% of eligible voters voted in the last election, which is significantly lower than voters in other provinces in provincial elections. So turnout kind of has a play there, and ultimately, what's best for your family? What's best for the pocketbook? Whether that means increased services, if you like what Kathleen Wynne did as it related to dental care, say tuition for students, pharma care for seniors, and those under 25. If you think that means more for your family going forward, then you might come out and vote NDP to preserve those new programs. But if you think they're costly and it's really not making that big of an impact on your bottom line, and what you want is tax relief in addition to hydro bills, then you're probably going to vote PC.
Okay, let's talk about the quote-unquote concession of Kathleen Wynne, Jamie. Why did she concede? Kathleen Wynne.
I think the Kathleen Wynne Ontario Liberal campaign has been one of the biggest electoral disasters we've seen in modern political history. I can't recall a political leader, especially one who is a sitting head of government, come out weeks before an election and say, "We've lost. Please do good to still elect some of our party into the polls." There's a kind of a general adage that the local, general kind of rule when looking at how you craft winning campaigns, that a local candidate can only really sway the vote 5% one way or another based on their local campaign and what their presence is like locally, and the rest really relies on the central campaign and the party campaign to get them across the finish line. So if I'm a Liberal candidate who is on a tight seat in a close race, what's definitely a change election, and my leader just went out and waved the white flag on behalf of all of us, I'd be absolutely appalled.
Yeah, it was unprecedented in political history. What do you think, Ari, about this unprecedented concession? And what could be the Liberal candidates in various ridings are thinking about their leader?
Well, I think, so there's a number of things on that. I think for the first part, I don't know if I would call it a concession per se. I think that she had a reality check and said very frankly, the Liberals are down in the polls. We are trailing significantly. There's a very, very high likelihood that we won't be in government and I won't be the premier on Thursday, the 7th of June. So I don't know if I'd call that a concession per se, although I do think the sentiment is there. What that does for the Liberal campaigns is it does two things. One, it frees them from having to run on Kathleen Wynne's record. And it allows them to sort of run a local campaign. And I see that in my own riding in Toronto St. Paul's, where the Liberal candidate, Jess Spindler, is running a very local-based campaign, as is the Conservative candidate there, Andrew Kirsch. But it's very much a campaign based off of local issues, local needs, almost reminiscent of a city council campaign. And I think that's something that you're seeing in a lot of these Liberal campaign offices right now is how can we bring this back to our constituents and not necessarily bring it back to all of the Ontario voters. So it is having an effect that it may be helping some campaigns. I don't think it's hurting any campaigns that she came out and said that. I think a lot of people already saw the writing on the wall and said, all right, you just confirmed what we already knew, but we're going to continue going out there.
So
and a lot of people are looking at candidates and saying, I like this person, not necessarily I like this party.
So you are in, your riding is St. Paul's. Are Liberals going to keep it, or they're going to give it off to either PCs or NDPs?
Listen, all cards on the table. I'm a card-carrying progressive conservative and also the chair of the co-chair of the Toronto St. Paul's Progressive Conservative campaign. So I hope that my candidate will be successful. But I don't take for 1 second knowing full well that Toronto St. Paul's has been a Liberal stronghold for the past umpteen elections. So if Andrew does pull it off and changes Toronto St. Paul's to be a progressive conservative riding, I think that's a real big feat that anybody would be very proud of. If
we go back and if we turn the pages of history, in 2014 the GTA was largely responsible for giving Kathleen Wynne's Liberal a majority government. However, after four years later, the party will be lucky to hang on to any ridings in the region. Is Liberal Party losing its party status, Jamie?
If you look at kind of how the numbers are projecting now, indeed, the Ontario Liberal Party will not have official party status in the next legislative session.
Wow.
They used to be a political party. They'll still obviously be a political party registered with Elections Ontario. There are a lot of longtime Liberals who are members of both the provincial and the federal party, and there are still quite a formidable force in Canadian politics. Of course, let's just look back to 2005. After Paul Martin lost government to Prime Minister Stephen Harper, everyone wrote the Liberal Party of Canada off for dead then, and they just came back and won a majority in 2015, 10 years later, going from third-party status all the way back to government. So indeed we have a severe constraint as to how the Ontario Liberal Party can function without an active caucus and the resources that come from the legislature with official party status. It'll make it harder for them to stand out and be heard on issues. But with the proud tradition of both the federal and the provincial Liberal Party here in Ontario, and the fact that they still are in government federally, and with activists fairly well represented, scattered across the province, I think it's premature to write the Liberal Party off for dead, and they'll continue to be a formidable force in our politics. And I think if you look at kind of what happened in the federal scene in 2005 through to Justin Trudeau winning the leadership, it's real clear that what this party needs at this point in time is generational change and party renewal. It is time for new people to step forward and put their name forward for leadership, and I think there'll be a lot of people who most people in Ontario won't know when they start that campaign. And it'll be a good thing to bring new life and new energy into that party going forward, because ultimately I think Ontario is better served when we have strong parties representing to compete and represent us in the legislature.
Okay, no, it was so good to talk to both of you. Anything, Ari, if you want to say something about Liberal Party losing its party status?
Well, much as what Jamie said, I think it may be a little bit premature to say if they're going to be losing their party status or not. If we were to go a little further, and let's say hypothetically they do lose their party status, I actually think that may be a very big boom for the party. I think the party would have an opportunity to reinvent itself, rebrand itself, much like the federal Liberals did. But it also frees them from having to be stuck on the legislative calendar. They can basically set their own agenda in the sense that you go out there, you get the media that you want, you make your statements, you put the government, hopefully a PC government, you take them to task, and you can get some headway there. And you don't have to worry about, well, you can only ask these questions during question period. You can pose the questions anytime you want if you're not a party.
Okay, so maybe one last question. Jamie, what do you think? Is Progressive Conservative Party going to get it tomorrow?
I'm not one to make predictions, but if you look at the polling data from across the industry and spectrum, I think it is definitely kind of framed as Doug Ford's to lose. And I think there's just too many questions hanging over Andrew Horwath for style of leadership and what the NDP government would mean to Ontario, that they're not going to get the groundswell support they need on turnout to make it happen. But we shall see tomorrow night. I'll be watching closely with everyone else.
I think I should still ask you one more question, Jamie. What do you think about Andrea Horwath's various slate of candidates who have been involved in questionable stances? Are those the reason she's a little behind?
I think that actually is a real issue as to why she kind of plateaued in the mid-30s percentage of popular vote support. As you kind of look at the beginning of this campaign, and this all started at the beginning of May, all the attention on the negative side was either on Doug Ford or Kathleen Wynne. But when the Liberal vote collapsed and the NDP started to surge, you saw the opposition parties and others with an interest in this campaign start to really put the NDP under a microscope. And you saw the candidates' issues, whether it was the candidate in Scarborough who tweeted the meme with quoting Hitler in an inspirational sense. If you look at the NDP MP who's accused what Canadian soldiers did in Afghanistan as war crimes, or saying the populace something that was an embarrassment to our history, and it just continues to bring off Canadians and a like that, I think it really planted the seeds of doubt. And rather than show real leadership and say that that's not what the NDP party stands for, instead she essentially defended her candidates. I think it really helped to form a consensus of doubt in the mind of the Ontario electorate, and ultimately might be what indeed prevents them from forming government tomorrow.
Okay. Ari, any message to our viewers? And then I would ask Jamie later. Any message to our viewers at TAC TV?
Well, I'll say the same thing that I've said for the past 4 weeks or so. Make sure to go out and vote. It's your democratic right. It's an honor. We're celebrating the 74th anniversary of D-Day. This is what these soldiers died and gave their lives for. Take your democratic right and go out and cast a ballot.
Okay, Jamie, last word from you.
It is not too late to echo what Ari just said. You can go to elections.on.ca, figure out where your polling station is. If you don't have a voter's card, just bring 2 pieces of ID, and you can still vote on election day. It's not too late. Get out and exercise your democratic right. The long-term health of our democracy and country depends on it.
Okay, thank you so much to both of you, Jamie Alerton from Conaptus and Ari Laskin of Capitol Hill Group. Viewers, today is also the D-Day, and we should pay homage and salute to our soldiers who protected us and gave their lives for this democracy, which is Canada. And to uphold this democracy, we should use our democratic right, which is vote, and you have that opportunity to use it on June the 7th, which is tomorrow, Thursday, to participate in the Ontario elections. With this, I will take off. Take care and see you soon. Ciao.